Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. On the agenda tonight, we're going back to the mid-1960s. We're going to be taking a look at Roy Clark, and he's going to be performing on guitar, banjo and the fiddle, and he's assisted here by Jimmy Dean because it is from the Jimmy Dean Show. So let's get these guys up on screen and let's see how Roy gets on.
Okay, guys, let's start it up for me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, train whistle went woo. That part there.
And there we have it. So, a short video for tonight, but there is so much packed in there in terms of technique, playing 3 different instruments, and Roy Clark with his ability to always inject humour into his playing so that the playing actually flies under the radar, because the technical ability on show here is crazy, and that's just talking about one instrument. I have mentioned in other videos that I've done on Roy that he was a nervous performer, and the comedy is something that he used in order to get over those nerves, and certainly in this performance, again, we have when he explains the noises that he's making on the fiddle, and it's something that he used to do in a lot of his performances. He would play and explain the noises he was making and what it's supposed to be, even though everybody knows what it's supposed to be because he plays it so well. But again, it just gets another laugh out of the audience. We're going to be starting with the guitar, of course, and the alternate picking, which I have mentioned on other videos that I've done on Roy, is in evidence here. But also the control, obviously with the faces that he pulls, sometimes he goes cross-eyed as well. So if you don't play guitar yourself, you won't necessarily appreciate the amount of difficulty going on here. But what I want to draw attention to with this video is the different techniques that are on show for the different instruments, and also the tuning that we have between the instruments, because you'll find that a lot of the techniques will cross over, but only to a point. Straight off the bat, we've got that humor element, the way that Roy counts in the song, but then the band doesn't come in, so he continues that counting, and then the band are absolutely on it when he starts playing the intro. And the great thing about this performance as well is the clarity of the playing with the tone, because again, a totally unforgiving tone, which you'll always find with Roy Clark's playing. It's deceptive because you can hear every note perfectly cleanly, but the tone that he's got is so clean. So the technique has to be of that level, else it wouldn't work. When mentioning that alternate picking technique, it's interesting to look at Roy's right hand and the way that he is anchored to the body of the guitar with his little finger in order to give him that reference point and be able to be so accurate with that picking moving across the strings. When you've got one part of your hand fixed on the guitar, it means that all of the other fingers and that pick can move in reference to that. And those strings are always going to be in the same place. So it's just something that happens subconsciously, and you're not thinking about your little finger when you're picking with the right hand, but it's something that keeps it really nice and solid and accurate, which is so important when playing at this kind of level. You will find some players that don't anchor onto the body of the guitar, and some top technical players do not anchor, but it's just that muscle memory to the point where the arm remembers the position in terms of angles of the forearm and the hand. So once you start practicing for multiple hours every day, for years, your muscle memory just remembers these tiny angles and the tiny adjustments needed to get from one string to the next. It just so happens that Roy is subconsciously anchoring onto the guitar. Once Roy then moves to the banjo, he's got to go through the process of putting the thumb pick on and also finger picks on the first finger and the second finger. So that's why you could see him just messing around with his hand, because he's having to get those picks on because he hasn't grown out his nails, which is something that you can do if you play banjo or fingerstyle on guitar. You can use those nails as your effective picks. So now that he's moved on to the banjo, all of the technique on the right hand has now changed because he's not flat picking anymore, which is when you just play with a pick and only a pick. He's now playing with his thumb, first finger and second finger. So getting those sequences up to speed is something that you have to practice in order to get just that speed up and be able to roll through those sequences. With the alternate picking, again, that is a standalone technique, something that you have to work on for a hell of a long time. So Roy has got both of these right-hand techniques up to such a high level. Obviously, with the faces that he's pulling, it will fly under the radar, but top technique with both of these instruments. With the banjo, the dexterity of the left hand, of course, is important, and that will cross over from the guitar. The only difference will be that tuning, and the runs will be slightly different because of that tuning. Once Roy's finished with the banjo, he moves on to the fiddle, and this is where we have that massive change in technique for the right hand, because it's in no way related to what we've just had, the flat picking and then playing with the fingers on the banjo. So having the bow, it's now a question of angles and consistency of keeping contact with the string. And it's something that Roy obviously has played and played and played on the fiddle just as much as the guitar and the banjo. But the interesting thing about the fiddle is the tuning, because it's exactly the same as the bottom four strings of a guitar or a bass guitar. It's exactly the same tuning in terms of going from G, D, A, and E. The bottom four strings on your guitar, or if you play bass, it's all tuned the same way. So that means that once Roy has a handle on that right hand technique, everything with the left hand, obviously it's twisted around compared to when you're playing on the guitar, but all of the muscle memory is still going to cross over. When I say that the muscle memory is just going to cross over from the guitar, it is a bit misleading because the guitar has got frets, so it makes it a lot easier to play. If you just put your finger on the dot on a guitar, you'll get a note that is nicely in key, is perfect pitch if you're perfectly in tune. But on a fiddle, you don't have that. So it is a case of learning exactly where to put your finger on that tiny effective fretboard that you've got without any clue as to where those notes are. And that is repetition. Just to explain the tuning as well, because those four strings, the G, D, A, and E, are tuned in fifths. That's what it's called. And this goes back to that same scale that I mention all the time, the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do scale, which is called the major scale. And being tuned in fifths, is just when you count up to the 5th note in the scale. So if we're starting on G, as we have G, and then we go A, B, C, D. So it's going to go from G to D. That is our 5th. And when it's tuned in 5ths, that's all that's happening. You then replace the first note with D, and the 5th note of the D major scale will be A. And exactly the same thing, you then put A at the beginning, and the 5th note of the A major scale is E. And that's just how it's described, as tuned in 5ths. So that's exactly what we have here with the lowest 4 strings of the guitar and the 4 strings of the fiddle. So now with that knowledge, we can analyze this video and see what's going on when Roy's changing instruments. The guitar and the fiddle, in terms of the muscle memory, they're going to cross over because 4 of the strings are the same tuning. Just to explain as well that when I say that muscle memory will cross over from the guitar to the fiddle and to a certain extent the banjo, but like I mentioned, that's a different tuning, so you won't be able to go through exactly the same muscle memory. The muscle memory that I'm talking about is when you play a particular run, you might use the first finger, second finger, and little finger. And then on the next string down, you might use the first finger, the third finger, and the little finger. And that is a set of muscle memory that is stored within your muscles so that if you repeat it the same every time, you can start to speed it up, and you can really start to speed it up so that it becomes subconscious, and then you can just start to keep pushing that tempo as fast as you can get it, and your fingers will automatically fire off that muscle memory that you have taught it for hours and hours and years, and it will consistently be able to do that. So, if the tuning is the same from one instrument to the next instrument, it means that you can still play first finger, second finger, little finger, first finger, third finger, little finger. The muscle memory crosses over, so you can fire off that muscle memory without having to think about it, and you'll still get the same notes from one instrument to the next instrument. The great thing about muscle memory is that once you have worked on a particular sequence and you've been really consistent with it and built it up from a slow speed to a faster speed, once it's in there, you can really start to speed it up. And that's all fast playing is on the guitar. It's firing off muscle memory. So you might have a 6 or 9 or 12 or 15 note sequence that you fire off, and then your muscle memory will do that. It will just repeat what has been practiced for endless hours, for days, weeks, months, and years. And when you're listening to top technical players like Roy Clark, these sequences are just fired off and they're seamlessly executed from beginning to end. So it could be argued that if Roy Clark, when he played, didn't have any of that comedy element, then he would have got a lot more recognition for his level of ability. On just the guitar, for example, any guitarist out there will know exactly how hard the stuff that Roy Clark could play is to pull off, especially in a live setting, on super clean tones that Roy used to play through. But it's great to feature Roy again on the channel now in 2020. I think that I'll feature Roy for every year going forward on this channel just because of his level of ability. There were other artists that might have been at the same level or a comparative level playing the guitar, but once you start adding in other instruments and being of a top technical ability on those, Roy Clark pretty much stands alone. And then when you add in that comedy element, the only guy that could have done what Roy Clark did was Roy Clark, and that is the point. That is his level of ability, and the top artists, performers of all time are like that. There's only one of them, and that's why they'll always be featured and why I will always feature them on this channel. So it's just another example of Roy Clark being so entertaining while he's playing that the non-players in the audience are blissfully unaware of the level of technical difficulty that he is producing on these instruments. Just to mention as well that the link to this video is going to be in the description below, and it's from the channel When the Cowboy Sings, and there's loads of really cool videos on that channel if you want to head over there and probably lose your evening or your day depending on what time it is. But thank you guys so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!